Recording in progress.
Are we live?
Yes, I suppose. People coming in. Unfortunately, we have to keep it muted, right? So I'm just gonna say hi to everybody, and if you guys want to say hi back, please use the chat box. Thank you.
So I think for most people, it's the end of the day, 6 p.m.
It's like probably 7 p.m. on some places. I do see some participants coming from the Africa region, so that must be like
midday.
already pretty late at night, right?
No, we're earlier. They're coming from like South Africa.
I mean, so it's already late at night for them, right? Or
it's late.
No, we are
earlier.
okay.
Yeah, we are
never
earlier.
mind.
It's 1
So
p.m. for them.
Okay, awesome. Hello, everybody.
Hello. Gonna wait like maybe a couple minutes for everyone to come in.
Yes, so if you guys have anyone that will be interested in the topic today, or your colleagues,
hurry up.
Yes, exactly. Come in, hurry up, chop. We have someone from Song Foundation Vietnam. If you guys want to add your
add your organizations in your name so we know where you guys are from.
Yeah, it would be great. Actually, I'm gonna do that for myself before I tell other people to do that.
Rename myself too.
Hello. We have like 10 people in now.
It's got 10 people. Hi, Aji. Thank you for coming.
Oh, someone.
Hi, Lumbani. Welcome to the session.
Hello. I think we've met before. Maybe your names is very familiar, Lumbani. And hello, IG. CPR UK Yogyakarta. It's the UCPR UK. Is that a name of university or like a community name?
How do you UCPR UK?
That's pretty long.
The M&E department. Welcome.
Awesome.
Yeah. Yeah,
I think because we are on webinar, Trang, that's why for the participants, there's no audio unless we open your mic. I think the host has to open the mic for you. I think that it's the webinar feature or something. But hopefully we can use the chat box as much as we can so we can learn together, because today I think will be great for us to kind of like learn from each other, right? There must be a lot of interesting insights and inputs also from you guys, so we can kind of like work things out together. Hello, who's raised hand? I saw a hand raised, or maybe not. Never mind. Yep.
Sash, I'm just going to prepare the project real quick on Artemis, our testing project.
Okay. So we probably gonna wait 1 more minute, guys. We'll start at 6:05 for those that's in the same time zone with me. I'm in Jakarta right now. So let's wait for 1 more minute. So again, if you have any colleagues, friends, anyone that you feel will be interested in the topic, and then also maybe they already registered, please don't forget to remind them, tell them to hurry up and join us, because it will be fun to kind of close the day. I wish I could say that thank God it's Friday. Unfortunately, not yet.
Feels like a Friday though, no?
Feels like a Friday. You're right. Oops. Why is it not working? Yep. Feel free to use the chat box for anything. Unless you guys have any questions, please also use the Q&A box. We'll try to answer that either via the chat or maybe via live, answering it live, because we do have Q&A session at the end.
Yeah.
And it's already 6:05, so I think let me just open it. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you very much for coming today. We have our impact training workshop, and in today's session, it will be me, Natasha, and then also Noah from Artemis Impact.
Hi guys.
And if you guys probably not familiar yet about Artemis Impact, it's basically a network based in Southeast Asia that helps social organizations like you guys and then donors and maybe corporates. Kayosi, can we go back to the PPT maybe?
You're still sharing your screen. Thank you.
Thank you. And then helping everybody to kind of create bigger and sustainable impact. So there's basically 3 pillars to do that. And one of that is Artemis Impact Platform that we will also be talking a bit today. And there's Artemis Community Program that maybe some of you guys already joined or ever heard before, because I think I see some familiar names in between the participants today. So yeah, next, we have a little bit of announcement to make. We have Artemis Forum for Nonprofit Organizations. It's on Facebook, guys. And we want to invite you guys to be part of the impact community because it basically to kind of give help and support to one another. And then you can also interact with Artemis experts. They will be online there. And then there's also routine access to some announcement, either that's about impact measurement or grants. So it should be very interesting for you guys if you are running your social activities or you are about to, maybe you're a community in your campus or like social organization, anywhere to be involved in it, because there will be a lot of announcements, very interesting announcements, and you can also kind of learn from each other and also from our experts.
And Tasha, I just wanted to add one thing there. Like after today, if you're going to go home and then or go apply some of the theory to your actual own project, you have some questions over how something's fit, or maybe you want to test out some application on Facebook and just, hey, this is what we created. We're happy to give feedback to whatever you guys do to see if you guys are going in the right direction. So
exactly.
Join and engage. Thank you.
Yep, so that would be very interesting if you guys join in. We can always kind of like help and answer some of your questions and can maybe also give some feedbacks. Just a couple housekeeping rules, guys, before we start. Next, Kayosi. Please also don't forget, next slide, to ensure that your mic is on mute. Is it me or maybe the slide is a little bit slow?
No, Yossi, can we go to the next slide, please?
Maybe there's some internet issue. Let me take over.
Okay. Thank you, Priyam. So just housekeeping rules, guys. Don't forget to put your mic on mute while we actually on the webinar. Okay. And we're on the webinar, so probably for you guys, the audio will be muted unless the host will let you guys to speak. And then feel free to also share some of your thoughts, maybe on the chat box, but if you have any questions, please put it on the Q&A box. There's a Q&A section at any point during the presentations, and that we will try to answer that either during or maybe at the end when we have Q&A sessions. And then if it's possible, please change your Zoom username to be first name / organization name. So like it's Natasha slash, is it slash like, or well,
Dash.
Artemis dash, I'm sorry, dash Artemis and then Natasha dash GRB or something like that. Noah dash Artemis. And today, like I mentioned in the beginning, it will be next. It will be me. I lead the business development department actually in PTGRB, and I will be accompanied by my colleague, actually, Noah.
Guys.
I want to say hi, Noah.
Okay.
And introduce yourself.
Okay, so hey guys, I think the title's wrong. Now currently CTO, also head of product of Artemis. Super excited to be here. Been here since the beginning. So really excited for today's session. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Noah. And before we start, we usually have polling. So if we go next, this is just to kind of help us understanding where you guys are before we actually share about the knowledge today. So if Priyam can help us to pop up the pollings, it's not going to be a lot of questions. Don't worry about it. If you're confused of the answers, just try to answer it as best as you can. There's about 5 questions for you. So let's wait for people to answer. Oh. Thanks, Kairan Musa, for the reminder. Do we have people filling in the polling, Priyam?
Yes. We have
Awesome.
16% there, and I think soon we'll be done.
60, 60.
2-0 at this point, 20. We got 5 out of 25 people. We're just gonna wait another 2 minutes, maybe people take a little longer. It's okay.
Okay. We have some more people coming in. Whoever that just joined now, we are running a polling, guys. It's not a test, so it's not going to be graded. Don't worry about it. It would just kind of help us to understand where you guys at in terms of understanding of what we're gonna cover today. So if you can fill in the polling, it would be very awesome. And we're waiting some more people to also fill in the polling.
Almost there. Just need a couple more. Just wait 45 more seconds and then we'll continue.
Goodies.
Got a good turnout, 26 people. Nice.
Okay, I think I'll end the poll and just share the results with everyone.
Okay.
Ah, okay. Thank you for the notification, Mas Aji. We'll try to figure that out. I think the link probably expired. Maybe you can use the link on the first email if you can let her know.
Okay.
Awesome. So let's go to the actual content of our workshop today. Next slide. So before we go into any concept or any frameworks that we're gonna discuss today, on the next slide, we want to kind of help you, not exactly help you, probably think together, start this session. I like for everyone basically here to visualize, to remember all the social activities that your organization has done so far. And try to answer whether have those social activities truly given the impact that you desire. So the changes on the stakeholders that you desire to happen. All those activities that you've done, does it truly have an effect? If you would like to share, you can also use the chat box to share your answers. I'll give you a couple seconds to kind of think with yourself.
Thanks for sharing, Zanup. So he says, in part, when you think about this question, there's usually a wide variety of responses. Because people are oftentimes not sure, right, if they're actually creating the impact that they want for the beneficiaries.
There's someone answer our program stumbles. It has impact, but want to expand the impact metrics to tell a better story. It's very interesting because telling a good story is not easy, right? You sometimes have to kind of like balance in between having a really great stories, the very qualitative, and also having quantitative data proof to be basically back it up, and having a good story, really, really powerful. Hopefully some of the parts that we're going to cover today can actually help you in that journey. Kara. Anyone else want to share a little bit before we go to the next question? Sometimes we feel the program sucks, but somehow our data says otherwise. That's very interesting. Given us the impact, but we still need to improve. Yes, definitely. We need to always improve, always to adapt. Limited tools to use on measuring the impact. We can see impact in reward-based activities. That's very interesting also.
Amazing, guys. Thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah, thank you very much. I would like to go to the next question on the next slide. This question is more about, try to think of your stakeholders, or maybe some of you call them beneficiaries, the people that you're actually trying to help with your social activities, your interventions. Are their core problems actually resolved? Do you think the effects actually reach them, creating any changes that's positive for them? What do you guys think about that?
And also think about the sustainability of the change that you're trying to create, right? Is the effect really going to be long lasting? Is it just a symptom that you're resolving, or are you really getting at the core of the problem? And that brings another aspect to the problem that we're trying to tackle today. Yeah.
Yes. Feel free to share in the chat box as well.
Yeah. We'll give each one a spotlight. But I mean, once as they're writing, I think Tash, we can keep going to the next slide.
Yep. So basically, all those questions and then all the answers that you guys are giving. Next slide. We feel like to be able to answer those questions, and then there's some people also in the chat box mentioned about we're not entirely sure. It seems some the program is stuck or something like that. To be able to answer those questions, you need to be able to show the impact that you've actually created from your social activities, right? Showing the scale of the change brought about by your social activities. And one of the ways in which you will be able to show that is by doing the impact measurement. Why would you need to do impact measurement? There's a lot of different benefits actually. We just gonna highlight a couple here. One of it is proof of quality and efficacy of your activities, of your programs, because by doing impact measurement, you will be able to see, you will be able to monitor, you will be able to evaluate things like the true effects of your social activities on the impact that you intend on creating, or even how big exactly the impact, how big exactly the change that actually happened, and whether that actually can attribute it to you, right? That's also another question. What's interesting of that proof, then you can share that understanding. So you have the same understanding, everybody on the same page, every stakeholders of your programs um, have the same knowledge of how your activities are helping creating the impact, where you guys are right now, whether you are actually heading toward the right direction. And then the last one is basically helps also increase the chances to gain funding, guys, because once you have those proof of quality and efficacy, you'll be able to kind of prove your concept, prove your works. It will be easier to communicate that with others, right? With public or even donors. And that will be becoming a stronger proof for you to get more and more support. Now, next, the big question is, how is it actually done? How is impact measurement done? For us, on the next slide, to start doing impact measurement, we have to take a step back and understand the theoretical framework that helps support measurement of impact. And that is by understanding and creating the impact framework. They are basically a structured method of describing and illustrating how your social activities are creating impact. So it helps you basically create an illustration of how the changes that you actually intended to create and how it actually can be achieved with what type of actions, right? And what type of investment that you have to give in there. There's a lot of benefits also to creating impact framework. Firstly, it helps you basically plan out how impact will be created through your social projects or your social activities. In our experience so far, there's a lot of NGOs, NPOs. We found that a lot of social projects did not start out by thinking about what they hope to achieve. They instead right away think about, this is the activities that we want to do. So one of the benefits of creating this framework basically help you to create this whole planning process. It become a lot clearer because you know where do you want to go, what are the goals, what do you want to actually change or impacting, and it helps your stakeholders better to understand what type of activities that needs to be done to be able to answer those. And then, of course, it also works with ensuring that your social activities suit the actual needs. So it really answering the needs of your stakeholders. Without the proper planning, we often find cases in which there is a huge lack of correlation between social activities that are being done with the impact that they intend to create, or with the needs of the stakeholders itself. So there might be some redundancies are created from the social activities. And this is more because maybe you're treating more into just the symptoms, right? You're not actually looking into the root cause itself and then trying to answer that, trying to change that. And thereby the change that they intended creating in the first place is also not attained, right? And the last one is being able to effectively communicate your impact. This is pretty straightforward because once you know, understanding what's exactly that you want to create, it's so simple for you to kind of share that to a lot of other stakeholders. Now on the next slide.
Sorry, I just wanted to add one more thing, Tash. Like there's a lot of impact frameworks out there. There's the theory of change, there is log frames, there is implementation science. There's like a couple of different frameworks you can use. We've kind of created our own little mesh that we found is the most practical, derived from the theory of change. And I think Tash will bring us through that on the next slide. Thanks, Tash.
Yep. So on the next slide, we come up with different components, and this is kind of like our way that we feel like the most practical so far, that we've been kind of trying out different frameworks. And in this part, there are different components, as you guys see. At the top, there's problem statements. Basically, you start off with understanding what is exactly the problem that you want to solve? What are the things that you want to tackle? In where exactly in the areas, being kind of also specific about it. And then the impact statement. It's basically what exactly the changes or impact that you want to create, to kind of also connect it with the problem that you want to tackle. And then from there, basically you create these nice 4 components at the bottom, starting from outcome on the long term. It's a long-term change, could be social, economy, environmental conditions.
Behavioral.
And then, yeah, there's a lot of different other type of changes. And then you move to the short-term and medium-term one. It's also changes. It could be like learning, it could be behaviors. And then there's also actions, basically. It's the activities, the actions that needs to be done to achieve those outcomes. Like I said in the beginning, this is usually where NGOs or NPOs actually jump in right away. They think about the actions without actually thinking about how and why it actually need to be there. So you need to think about what are the changes that you want to create first, and then move backwards. And then think about what type of inputs, so resources or investments that are actually needed for you to conduct the activities. I want to show you simple example on the next slide. So on the next slide, there's this project called Peduli Pangan in Indonesia. They basically try to improve farmer welfare. Those farmers that lost basically their business because of lockdown, they cannot sell their products, the agricultural products, because of lockdown or because of pandemic in general. And then on the other side, there's poor urban people in Jakarta in Indonesia that cannot access food because they maybe have to stay indoor or stay in their house because of lockdown. They're living in the black zone of pandemic of COVID. And then there's also some people that maybe lost their job because it's informal workers. And then they're pretty much struggling with that. And that become the long-term outcomes that Peduli Pangan wants to create: improvement of farmer welfare and the food security for the poor. And then they kind of move backwards into thinking about what type of outcome on medium term, and then the actions itself and what type of inputs. What's interesting point here that I want to show you basically is those links that you guys see are connected with each other. That's the causal links that really very interesting in this type of framework that you need to create and help you to understand the relationship, basically. Able to know how each of these components can affect each other. Now, I want to show you also simple steps on the next slide about how to create your impact framework. Again, like Noah mentioned, there's a lot of impact framework out there, also with their own steps. So we kind of come up with the simple steps of the framework that we created out of different frameworks that we've been learning and using. Here, there are 5 steps, basically. So start with identifying the core problem and its root causes, right? After that, you can be able to outline the impact, then outline the outcomes, then after that, outline the actions, also identifying the input needed. Next, I wouldn't go too detailed about each of the steps because we're gonna have a really fun live co-creation, right?
Yeah, very fun.
Supposedly fun, so let's make it fun.
Okay.
Very fun live creation where we kind of walk you guys through on how to actually create this impact framework, and later on also how we plan about data collection as part of the impact measurement. So you guys can also see how we people that creating this brainstorm with together to create that. So I'm not going to go too deep into the theories. I'm just going to share a little bit to you guys. On the step 1 is on identifying your problem statement. Very simple questions that you can answer. What's a problem would you like to solve? And then what are the root causes, right? It's very important. Problem and the root causes. Try to think about what are causing the problems you're trying to solve to occur. For instance, if you're trying to solve a problem in the field of education, ask yourself, what exactly educational issues in particular are you trying to solve? And why do such problems occur in the first place? What's the main cause of that? And then on the step 2, you'll see about outline impact statement. I'd urge you to think slightly ahead, maybe 5 or 10 years, for instance, and think about what long-term systemic change do you want to create? What type of changes would you like to bring to your community from the interventions that you would like to create? So in this part, what's very important is to have also your needs assessment usually. Without that, sometimes it will be very difficult, because if you don't understand your stakeholders, what exactly they need, what are they struggling with, what are their potential, what are their characteristics also, it will be very difficult to understand what type of change that you need to create to answer their challenges, right? To be able to actually fit in with their needs, to be able to actually answer those root causes. On the next step, on step 3, is outlining the outcome. So you could see what changes would need to happen to create the impact that you want. So what type of changes need to happen first, right? Before that impact that you want to create will be able to create it, basically, put it simply. If you look into this outcome, sometimes you also need to think about your capability, your capacity, also your time frame of your project. So think about things that also really need to happen, but also things that you will be able to intervene. On the step 4, you will see about outlining the action. I think this is pretty straightforward, right? What do you need to do to achieve your outcome? So this is your actions. And then on the next one is talking about outlining the inputs itself. What resources, what type of investment basically do you need? And it needs to actually things that come from you. If the things, the inputs are coming from maybe other stakeholders, you need to kind of identify that. It basically to just help you to know that this is actually the inputs that we're putting in, and these are the inputs that other stakeholders are putting in. That also helps you to kind of understanding and mapping out your efforts, and help you to also measure it better. Now, like I said, we'll have a very fun live creation. So Priyam, if you can give Noah the rights to share, we'll walk you through this very fun session. Should be fun. I believe it will be fun.
You have the air quoted touch. It's gonna be fun. You're gonna get suggestions from the audience. It's gonna be great. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so this is just a demo account on our platform. And so this is what it looks like when you first log in. I mean, I could just log in real quick.
Yeah, so guys, this is Artemis Impact platform that I mentioned in the beginning. If you guys don't have the account yet, if you guys maybe haven't signed up to it, maybe haven't download the the other one, the mobile app, we call it Artemis Impact for data collector, if I'm not mistaken, for data collections.
But you guys are all organizers, so this is the application that you guys were interacting.
Yes.
So for today's demo, we've we've created this project already here. You can easily create a project here by just filling out this modal very quick. But we just have a completely blank project here. Like there's nothing in there.
Yeah.
And Tash, what did you want us to do together?
Yeah, so why we're using this guide, because there's a nice feature that we have already on theory of change. So we will work on the steps that are already explained on Artemis Impact platform. And this is just a disclaimer from the beginning. Usually people when they create theory of change or like impact framework, it will take quite some time, and it will be involving a lot of people, right? Different stakeholders that will be affected or will be affecting the projects. And then there's, of course, needs assessment needs to be done before creating our impact framework. So today, because we have a limited time, we'll do very simple one, and you guys can kind of like innovate and expand and learn more about it later and actually apply that to your projects.
Right.
Now, if you can go to create theory of change, let's put a title.
Wait.
By the way,
yeah, go ahead.
I almost forgot. We actually random pick from the participants. I don't know if the person is here. It's Bambang Winsanggeni from Komunitas Sekolah Marginal. If you're here, Pa Bambang, maybe you can raise your hand or say something on the chat box, or maybe we can help you to open your mic later so we can co-create it together. But this is basically we chose Komunitas Sekolah Marginal. I think it's marginalized school communities of school.
Yeah, KSM for short. KSM for short. Yeah.
KSM for short. And we're gonna pretend that we are KSM's team, even though we don't have much understanding about them.
All of us together, we're KSM.
Yeah, all of us together, guys. So if you have any ideas, inputs, feel free to put that in the chat box, because this is basically a live creation. We're going to discuss it all together. So it's not just me and Noah, but all 36 of us. Yes.
So first things first, in the theory of change, as we said before, we have to define the problem statement. What is the problem, the core problem that we're really trying to solve? I think without prior knowledge of KSM, it's going to be a bit difficult. We've done a little research on them beforehand, right, Tash?
Yes.
Did you want to say something about what they do?
So what we understand, we couldn't really find much information. As far as I know, correct me if I'm wrong, if Pa Bambang or the team here, they have these activities in Depok, in Yogyakarta. It's in Indonesia. And then basically the issue that they see is there's no access to learning facilities for students in that area, in Depok, right? And then because of that, then the educational quality also is not as great as expected, and those kind of things.
So one way to define the problem statement would be, as Tash so amazingly put, is currently there's no good access to learning facilities in Depok for students.
Yes. Now remember, the question that we showed to you guys, there's two questions, right? It's not just about the problem, but also the root cause.
The reason behind it.
Yes, the reason behind it. Let's also think about that. What do you think, Noah, the reason? This is because
I don't know, like there could be many reasons why there's no good access to learning facilities. But I think one of the ones that he mentioned that his actions, like the activities they were doing, they were trying to increase the funding that Depok was getting to kind of finance the learning facilities and support of education in that area. So I think one of the reasons the root causes of bad learning facilities is because there is a lack of support and funding
maybe from like the local authorities, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
The educational department.
Let's say from local government, right?
Okay.
From local government. So this is an example of one way to write the problem statement. Later, we will have resources available for you guys to kind of go in depth on how to write a proper problem statement and certain pitfalls and tips and tricks and how to do it best. Because a lot of people here sometimes write too much or give way too much context, and you really want to be concise here.
Yes. Sometimes it's good to have details in it, but if you go too detailed and it becomes like really long, that also making it hard for you to understand and making everybody to understand as well. Because this is a framework, it's not just for you only, right? This is something for your team, for your stakeholders to understand. So sometimes
the rule of thumb is if somebody reads your problem statement who knows nothing about your organization or problem, they should be able to guess what you're going to be doing, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
that's a really good one. And then, so if you have like a lot of problem statements in your mind, or maybe based on your needs assessment, try to probably break it down as well, right? So if you have, let's say, 2 different problem statements, don't push it into one chain of theory of change or one chain of impact framework. That will just kind of making it hard for you and for other people to understand. So let's move to the next step, maybe, Noah.
Yeah, let's define the impact statement, which is again the long-term systemic change that you want to create over time.
Yes, I want to throw the question maybe to our participants today. What do you guys think of the impact statement?
Yeah,
would be. So thinking about long-term systemic change that you want to create, right? With that problem statement, what do you want to create as the, what is it called? KSM, right?
KSM, yeah.
Any ideas? Any thoughts? There's no right and wrong here.
Yeah, and we'll this is your chance to try it out, and then we'll be able to give you some feedback on if it's in the right direction, how we can build on that. Oh, more schools. I like that idea, right?
Schools, so okay.
A long-term impact might be increasing the amount of schools available to students in the area.
Yeah, I like Collins as well. More specific about access to learning facilities, right? That's
right.
Also being more specific.
We'll get into that later, but more schools can be an indicator of this outcome.
Yes.
Yeah, we'll talk about that later. But I like Colin's answer as well. Increase access to learning facilities for all, right? So one way to write the problem statement is I don't know, what were the actions?
So if we increase the support, because that's root cause is the support, right? If we increase the support from local government, right?
Yeah.
That's what we said, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. By increasing the funding, of course, and raising awareness, maybe.
Yeah.
Oh, I like that. Government budget, right? That's about the funding.
By increasing, I'm going to use that word, government budget. I like that.
I have access to learning from Yeni. More students finishing grade school. By increasing funding and raising awareness, then where are we? Why is it so small?
It's not allowed me to create a project that says double check for it. Oh.
Is that an issue on the app, perhaps?
Okay, well, Cecile, we'll get right back to you in a bit. But let's quickly finish the impact statement. So if we increase the support from local government and increase the government budget, then ultimately, I think, Colin, you had a really good way of saying it. Be able to increase, or also Ajay, you as well. We will be able to increase the access.
Access to learning facilities.
To students in Depok. Yeah, And
Awesome.
why this impact statement is good is because, again, the rule of thumb, right? Anybody who doesn't know anything about your project can read this statement and understand what you're trying to do.
Exactly. Has to be very clear, right?
Yeah. Okay, so now that we've defined the
Oh,
title, yeah.
One thing that we usually also look at, you guys must be aware already with SDGs, right? Sustainable Development Goals. That's also one way for you to take a look and kind of like help you also connect your activities with like global goals. Like, so if you have any activities that may be related to any type of global goals or sub goals, you can also have that aligned and being part of your impact statement as well. That also works.
Yeah.
That's one of the approach that you can use. Now
So-
we go to the next one.
Right, we've defined the theory of change, or a theory of change, because one project can actually have multiple theory of changes, multiple chains within it. But this is going to be our main one for today. And as you can see here, we have 3 areas, right, that we've defined. We have inputs, action, outcomes.
Yeah.
Gosh, you want to start us off?
Yes, let's start with the outcome because that's our step 3. And like I mentioned, our impact framework is moving backwards. So let's start with outcomes. What do you guys think? Any ideas at the moment? I really want to kind of hear because you guys been giving a lot of great ideas. Okay, Cecile is trying to figure out.
No troubleshooting for Cecile. Right now, the first outcome that we want to define is what is the longest term outcome that we can define, right? And this is not necessarily the impact statement, so kind of one step behind that.
Behind the impact statement. So before that impact that you guys just defined to happen, what is it that has to happen first?
Yeah.
So you look back into the root problems, the problem statement, look back into your impact statement, try to illustrate and think about it. And
like
for
that.
me, maybe, yeah, better education
For children.
for children.
And I like that because it indicates an increase in a certain direction, so an increase, and it defines the thing that you want to improve, which is education for children, right? And then in the description of the outcome, you can be a bit more specific for people you want to define. So let's say, or actually in the assumption, let's say children are ages or are defined in between ages 1 and 18. Right?
Yeah, this is also very important, guys. So parameters or terms that you have in your problem statement, impact statement, your outcomes, you need to kind of like scope that, right? So it will be easier for you to know like these are exactly what I want to intervene, or these are the things that later on I need to measure.
So one thing I'm adding in the description right now, because I think it's important, better education as an outcome is great, but it also seems a little bit general for me. So in the description, what I would like to define is better education means that more students attend school. Better education means more schools available, right? So you kind of flesh out the idea of what sorry, I was just reading Priyam's comment. Better education means more schools available. So you kind of flesh out the idea of what the outcome really means, because if you just kind of stay at this level of better education, then you won't be able to really measure impact on this outcome later down the line. So better education means more schools available. Children means are defined between 1 and 18. I think that's good for now. We can create this outcome.
We got a really nice one other outcome. Yenny said about 20% allocated funds increased by government for learning facilities in Depok.
I like that very much too.
Yes, that's very cool.
So increase of 20%, increase telecom and allocated funds
Yes.
by governments for learning in Depok. Nice. So description maybe here, what I would put in the description is maybe 20% of allocated funds. How do we get that data? So maybe information about funds is taken from an annual government report.
Yes, or maybe like a statistical report on national level or province level.
And then you would define that in the description that the information is taken from here. Okay, and then this is something that I wanted to show you guys too. Oh, the length of the title must be 11 to 50. Huh. Wait, let me do this again.
What was it? The
increase
in
20%
allocated funds from the government.
20% increase in allocated funds by governments to, let's call it education dots, and then budget information taken from annual government reports. I think this should work. Okay, amazing. So now that we have two outcomes here, we're able to also separate them into different layers, right? So this is the more long-term outcome on top. So what I can do is I can move it up here and know that this one comes first and then this one comes. Just to quickly show an example, test outcome 3. And you can test outcome 4. And then you're able to create as many layers as you need because some theory of changes are longer than others, right? But for now, let's stick with these two. I like these two. Do we want to add a couple more?
I think let's keep with that.
Okay.
I know there must be like a lot of other outcomes out there, and I think Yenny and also Kara kind of brought up really great points as well. But let's stick with that for now, guys. We will try to make this simple and also under 2 hours.
Yeah.
Let's go with the next step, which is creating the actions, right?
Right. Okay.
What do you need to do? The actions.
Well, what would you guys do to try to increase the government funding? These are very straightforward, right? Like, just think about some of the activities that you organize. Maybe you'd want to use volunteers. Maybe you need to speak to some people. What are the campaigns you'd run?
Yeah, I think campaigns would be interesting, right? Advocating, having an open dialogue with the government, for example, being able to be involved in the budget planning. Yes, advocacy, lobbying, and this kind of thing.
I know it's kind of the same thing, but I'll write it anyway. Lobbying.
Writing letters to politicians. Maybe some like petitions.
Oh yeah, writing letters, like writing petitions.
Letters, a petition. Key official recommendation to programs.
Writing petitions. Maybe also fundraising.
Yes, that also works because we have the better education, meaning more schools, right?
Right, and then the outcome here could probably be not so directly from the fundraising, build facilities or increase, have more facilities built. That would be an outcome too. Right.
Awesome.
Okay, cool. I think we have a nice array of actions and outcomes. Now, what about inputs?
Yeah, so this is basically the things that you want to invest in, right?
Yeah.
If you want to do petition, if you want to do lobbying, and then fundraising, what type of things that you have to invest in it? I would say things like content you need for like campaigning about it, advocating it, or maybe the network itself, right?
the marketing content. What did you say, Tash? A network?
Network, yes.
Network. What else? I mean, there's some obvious ones out there, guys. What inputs do you need to basically do all these actions, right?
Funding.
Funding. Yeah, that's a big one. Funding. Maybe in the interest of time, we now just kind of show you guys. Okay, so now that we've kind of created a theory of change, project staff, yeah, staff. So volunteer.
Yeah, human
staff,
resource, like human resource.
Slash human resources.
That's really good one.
Yeah. So now what we can do is we can create a chain reaction to what we think leads to something. So we need human resources for writing petitions. We definitely need human resources for fundraising. We need human resource. Actually, we need human resources for everything, right? Funding will help us with running advocacy campaigns. Funding will help us with fundraising, funnily enough. And funding will help us write writing petitions. Marketing content is for
the advocacy campaigns.
Advocacy campaigns, and I think network is more for lobbying to government, right?
Yeah.
And then actions. Now, running advocacy campaigns. I think all the lobbying, advocacy campaigns, and petitions is more to government budgets, but then fundraising is more directly to do with having more education facilities built.
I mean, advocacy can also, or lobbying can also lead into the more facilities to be built, right? Because
yeah,
then
that's true. Right, that's true. So
the government also allocate things to that.
Yeah. And then ultimately what these two need to lead to is our main outcome here, which is better education. This is as we've defined it here. So now in, I don't know, how long was this? Like 15 minutes, 10 minutes together for KSM, we've built our first draft of a theory of change. We've kind of defined the problem. We've defined the impact that we want to create long-term and defined how our project is planning to create the change that it's planned out to be, which is really cool.
Awesome. So let's move to another interesting part of the workshop today. If you want to take back the rise to share, Priyam.
Oh, yeah, I'll stop sharing right now. And then maybe, yeah, awesome. Can we put the presentation back on? Okay, so now we get to the nitty-gritty, the details, where a lot of people get a little lost. So high level, we've created the theory of change, sorry, the impact framework, and now we've kind of set out that high level. Now we need to start collecting the data. And this is difficult, can get a little complicated, but if you follow the steps that we're outlining, it should be pretty straightforward. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, so this is a bit of a recap. Our impact framework, remember, with inputs, actions, outcomes, and the long-term outcome. Now, what we really need to do impact measurement is, let's go to the next, is attach indicators to every level of your impact framework. So an indicator is basically a number that represents the movement of that element. So if an input is funding, right, then the indicator attached to that input element is amount of funding received. If an action is petitions, then the indicator attached to the action is how many petitions signed. If an outcome is increasing the amount of facilities available to schools, then an indicator can be the delta change or the amount of schools built, or even the amount, the increase in test scores among students in an area, right? So those are all indicators that help represent the change or the fulfillment of the outcome, action, or input. And one step beyond that, once you've defined the indicator, you need to break them down into its fundamental data points. And we'll get to that specifically in a bit, but this was just like a high level overview. So let's go to the next slide. There's basically 6 steps on data collection for impact measurement. The first step is determining what you really want to measure. Now, the reason why we say this is because you don't always need to measure every single element within the theory, within your impact measurement framework. But so the first step is determining what you want to measure. Then the second step is attaching the indicator or indicators plural to that element. The next step is you want to set a target. Within that indicator, what is the goal you really want to achieve? And that's the target you want to set. Step 4 is determining the data points. A lot of indicators sometimes are an amalgamation or calculation of different types of numbers that you have to collect. And you have to structure that out and categorize it so you're prepared for that data collection. The 5th step is the methodology on figuring out who is going to do the data collection, how many times are you going to do the data collection, and all that kind of stuff. We'll get into detail later. And then the last step is once you've kind of figured all of that out, it's actually creating the surveys or the questions that you're going to be asking to collect the data. Okay, amazing. Let's go to the next slide. So determining an outcome to measure. What outcomes do I need to and can measure? Oftentimes in a project, you'll have so many root causes or so many problems that you want to fix that you might have more than one impact framework, or you might have even some that are kind of like related to the same project, but like they're 2 kind of chains. What you have there then is you'll probably have outcomes that are important, that are like strategically important, like one thing happens after the other, but you don't have to measure every single outcome. You only have to measure the outcomes that help you prove that your long-term outcome is being achieved. If you guys have any questions, if I'm going too fast, let me know. I know Tasha's already looking at me that I need to slow down. So I'll slow down a little bit. Let's go to step 2. So now, determining the indicator. What unit can I use to show that my outcome is being achieved? Now, this is super important because what you want to do here is to choose a number that is representative of the outcome that you've defined. What I mean with that is that in the example of better education, or let's use a different example because we're going to do that later. In the example of better livelihood of a farmer, I need to choose an indicator that defines better livelihood, aka it could mean, for example, earning more income in a month. So monthly income is the indicator that defines better livelihood. Or another indicator could be maybe access to fresh water or access to healthcare are all indicators of better livelihood that I've defined in my outcome. So increases in those numbers will ensure the fulfillment of that outcome. Yeah.
And sometimes you guys don't have to come up with your own indicators all the time. There's a lot of sources out there, right, Noah? Like SDGs have their own indicators, or maybe Iris Plus, and a lot of other international organizations can also have one out there that you guys can also use if that actually align with your projects and stakeholders' characteristics.
Yeah, amazing, Tash. Thanks for reminding me. Like, as Tasha said, you can create your own indicators bottom up, or you can use indicators that have already been defined by organizations. Oftentimes, though, in practice, unfortunately, the indicators defined by organizations like the UNDP or GIN are very high level and only apply to your long-term outcomes. Your immediate or short-term outcomes, usually their indicators need to be defined by you directly. And I see a question. I'm so sorry, I can't pronounce your name. Okay, I'm not gonna.
It's Hairunisa.
Hairunisa.
Very interesting, yes. How is the condition of the farmer now versus after the program? Actually, that's something that maybe we will cover later on the baseline studies.
Exactly.
Right?
Well, that's a great point, and we'll get to that in a bit. Okay, so step 3, determine goal or target. Now that you've defined the number or numbers that are representative of your outcome, you now have to create a goal. In 4 or 5 months, 6 months, or a year, this outcome or this number I want to see increase by 5%, or I want to see this number increase by double, right? And it's super important that you give yourself a goal, because otherwise you'll be working endlessly towards nothing. And it's sometimes important to give yourself a stretch goal and then a realistic goal within that step. Anything you'd like to add there, Tash?
I think that's very interesting. And then it's sort of something that maybe, if I'm not mistaken, Bayeni brought up also, things like 20% and then 30% or something like that. I want that to be increased. And you put the actual time frame in that. And think about not only your ambitions, right, guys, but also your stakeholders' characteristics. There's also a lot oftentimes where you're thinking about women's contribution or portion of their contribution toward the family's economy. And you want them to not only contributing for like 5-10%, but it goes like up to like 70-80%. But that's your ambitions. However, your stakeholders, the woman itself in their family, it becomes awkward for them to have way bigger portions of revenue in their family. So it becomes bigger from their husband, for example. And you have to think about those kind of things as well.
Right. I see there's another question coming. Should goals and targets always be quantitative? I think there's like 2 schools of thought here. But the way that we usually preach on impact measurement is that if you think it is qualitative, then there should be a way for you to show it quantitatively. So that means that you can try to measure the indicator in a qualitative way by saying likely, very likely, unlikely, very unlikely, and very likely, right? But then what you would want to show quantitatively is that over time, it goes from unlikely to very likely. So you can use subjective words sometimes as ways to measure data, but the way we see it is that if you can, which is most of the time, you should be able and should show your indicators in a quantitative way. Yeah, I hope that answers your question. Okay, so let's go to step 4. This is determining the data points. So what data points would I need to measure my indicators? So an example here to just make it realistic and not just speak in hypotheticals is oftentimes indicators are a calculation of numbers, such as an average or a sum. One of the indicators we had in our project that we worked with, Peduli Pangan, was an increase in farmers' monthly income. So with that, the 2 data points we needed to calculate that was the data, the monthly income they had before the project and the monthly data they had after the project. And on top of that, the indicator that we've defined was average increase, an average. So an average is a calculation of the sum of all the numbers that we collected divided by the amount, or was it? Yeah, I think divided by the amount of farmers that we collected from, the sum of the units, right? So those were the data points that we had to define beforehand or break the indicator down to. And then once we've defined those data points, we could then be like, okay, to get these numbers, we have to ask these and these questions to the farmers. So if you have an indicator that you're not entirely sure how to get directly from a beneficiary or stakeholder, break it down into its data points. And then the rule of thumb there is 1 data point is usually 1 question, right? You don't want to include more than 1 or 2 indicators or 1 or 2 data points within the same question, because that would get confusing. Okay, so this is a really tricky part that a lot of people sometimes stumble upon. So we'll keep going. But if you have questions about this, please do ask. Yeah. Let's go to step 5. So now that you've defined your data points, let's stick to the example of average increase in sales or average increase in monthly income, right? Now you have to define the methodology. So the methodology is who am I defining where the data is coming from? So like, who am I asking this data from? Am I getting this from a database? Am I getting this from a stakeholder? Or who is also responding to the question? Is my volunteer going to interview the stakeholder? Or is this a survey that I'm going to be sending out and they're going to be filling out directly? What you also have to figure out or plan ahead is when in the project am I going to be asking for this information? Am I going to be asking this at the beginning of the day, at the end of the activities, before the activities even start? Or am I going to make everybody report to one person and then one person inputs it into the database? These are all questions that you need to answer before you start data collecting. And the most important thing, I think, is frequency, because a lot of times actually people think that data collection is such a big thing. I don't have time for it. I have way too much on my head to basically be executing my project. But oftentimes, all data collection is asking the same question at the beginning, a couple times in the middle, and at the end of your project. And then maybe on some other questions way after the project for the long-term outcomes. But oftentimes data collection isn't more than that. So if with the right planning and the right tools to help you, data collection shouldn't create too much overhead for you as an organizer. Tash, anything you'd like to add?
Yes, if I may add a little bit, guys, on Noah brought a really good point. An example of by whom it could be your volunteers, could be your internal team. Sometimes it could also be a third party, someone's from external, right? So it really also depends on what type of data that you want to collect. Sometimes it could be very sensitive data, let's say about revenue, and you couldn't really have that if you ask them yourself, because maybe you're not that close or you're not speaking the same language and stuff like that. So you can also use like cutters or people that actually been on the ground, or people that will come in to help you kind of validate the information to make sure that the data that you're collecting are not going to be biased.
Yes.
One example.
Cutters are, Tash.
Yes.
Cutters. I don't think.
Cutter is like usually people that goes on the ground collecting data, or they do like helping on small scale health facilities in the community, something like that.
Yeah.
And one of the example that we did, like field staff can also work, yes, but it really depends on what type of data and your accessibility towards those data. One example we did is because we're asking the revenue, the average revenue that Noah mentioned, it's not easy for us to actually come to these rural villages in West Java in Indonesia to ask the farmers how much revenue or sales that you have, like that you got for the past months. So we use these small cooperatives for farmers, the workers there, to be able to ask that for us. So those are different approaches that you guys can also use.
Yeah, and I think the key that Tash was trying to say is that it's just the planning ahead that makes the data collection then very easy. Because the more you plan ahead, that also is way easier. You could just ask the same question at the beginning, middle, and end. And I think I'll get to that in a bit with the baselining to someone's earlier point about getting the data.
Plan ahead and keep iterating. That's very, very important, guys, because you can ask like 10 questions in the beginning and turns out you realize that actually I may only need 2 or 3 questions only to ask, right?
Exactly. Okay, so let's go to the last step. So now that you've defined who is going to be doing the question, maybe it's your field staff, or maybe you're sending directly, and how many times you're actually going to be asking the question, or maybe it's still before the project, so you can get the data from before you even intervene right now, and you don't have to ask a question about how it was before the project. you can formulate your questions. We'll get to your question in a bit, Trang. Thank you. And then, so you're able to, now that you've defined the methodology, you've defined your theory, your impact measurement framework, and now you can formulate your questions, which is the surveys. One thing to really keep in note here is, are you using the right language for the beneficiary and stakeholder that you are addressing? Is it simple enough for them to understand? And are you not using any words that they might not understand, especially maybe one thing that we've seen is that people have defined their indicator, and then they've basically asked their stakeholder directly with that indicator, but they haven't simplified it or changed the wording in a way that makes it easy for this beneficiary to reply to the question. So it should be like an everyday conversation thing. Tash?
I just want to add one more point. Like Noah already gave you guys an example. Sometimes it's not going to be like numbers, very quantitative. It could be like very unlikely to very likely or something like that. So very qualitative. And then for that means that you might not need a question, but instead a statement, right? So it really depends also on what type of approach you do when you're collecting data. If you do an interview or questionnaires, definitely there's a very specific questions that you have to set. But if you do an observation, or sometimes people do like group discussion and stuff like that, maybe there's parameters or like statements that you need to set up way before. So you know on how to kind of like rate that, be able to measure that.
Right, and I think on Trung's question on how to avoid bias and misinformation, I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with data collection in total. And I think that's where you have to kind of pick where you're getting your data from correctly, because you'll probably not be able to interview all of your beneficiaries or all your stakeholders, but you need to be able to choose a sampling group from a good sampling group from your whole outreach that is representative of the whole. And then I think that's where the finessing comes in, to be able to data collect, make the sampling group a trustworthy one.
Or you do a random check or something like that.
Yeah.
That also works.
And then yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. We would like to talk, guys. We're sorry.
Yeah. Tash, you talk. It's all good.
Just one thing that you have to think since the beginning is know well your stakeholders, Trang. That's the most important part, because there's a lot of different ways of avoiding bias, but being able to answer that is by knowing your stakeholders. There are ways to answer that later. And for example, when we did the Peduli Pangan, we start to figure out first our characteristics of our stakeholders, right? And then from there, we see that avoiding bias maybe not going to work if we add in third party, because that's not going to be just confusing these people. And then they will hate the third party and they will hate us at the end of the day, because we're putting in new people coming to their house and stuff like that. So we use the people that they actually know, people that we also trust, the cadres that I mentioned, to help us asking the question. And using the approach of very how do you call it? It's like very intimate approach. It's like not you interviewing them, but it's like someone just like gossiping or something in the neighborhood. So use that approach. It actually works, because then they become very, very honest about their answers.
Yeah, and I think, Yenny, that's a great point too, is you can do a pilot study. If time and resources allow, do a pilot study on a small scale to kind of test out if your initiative works or if your questionnaire works. That's always good as a testing ground. Thanks for your advice, Yenny. That was good. Let's go to the next slide. I think this was something that someone talked about. So in data collection, what's really important as well, that what a lot of donors also look for, is that not only that they see a delta, but also that they see a baseline, right? Wait, also, as I'm explaining this, Tash, can you take a look at the Q&A? I think there's 2 questions waiting there.
Yep.
Okay, so it is super important that that you get a baseline. So baseline is basically, what does the indicator look like before your intervention? So you're able to show that it started here, and then with our intervention, we were able to push the indicator to this level. And what you usually want to show in your indicator is your baseline, your midline, which is during your intervention, and then the delta of your indicator. And then end line is at the end of your project. And then this is something that a lot of projects don't have resources or time to do, but it is kind of good practice, is to then, after your intervention is done, you continuously still try to collect data, which is the ex post data. That's supposed to show how sustainable your initiative was at the end. And then with that baseline, midline, endline, and ex post data, donors or stakeholders can get a very good idea over how effective your initiative was, and how sustainable your initiative was. So and it's also good for you to see how much change you're actually creating with your indicators. Okay. That was that point. Did you want to answer any of the Q&A?
Yeah, I think we have time right now. So any Mercy Corps Indonesia, do impact measurement needed for short-term programs? Our program will run for 2 months of training. Is N-line is sufficient or need other adequate measurement? I want to answer this live because I think it's very important and very interesting question as well. For a short-term program, like 2 months program, especially if it's like disaster relief, right? You have to do immediate stuff. Sometimes you cannot really do a baseline. There are certain programs that I talk to doing disaster relief. They do a baseline and end line together in one form. Sometimes it cannot work, sometimes it can work. It really depends on what type of questions you need to answer or what type of data that you need to be able to measure your indicators. So of course, measurement is needed. For me, Annie, this is also very my personal opinion. Of course, it's needed, but maybe you cannot measure the impact, right? That's why you can take a look on your short-term outcome, your immediate outcomes, to see and to be able to measure whether your activity is actually creating a change or not, right? Things like when you're donating laptops, you're donating like food, distribution of food or something like that, you can actually see the immediate or short-term outcomes. What we did in Peduli Pangan is we're looking into their daily intake, their nutritional value and stuff like that. So there's a way for you to measure things and being able to say that there's change actually happened. But of course, it's not impact if you're doing changes in health and stuff like that, and it's like running for 2 months. And is N-line is sufficient or need other adequate measurement? If it's possible, of course, you don't want to have just one set of data at the end of your program. You would like to have baseline, like Noah mentioned, and having the midline, or even after the program or your intervention already ended, they exposed to actually being measured. So I hope that answer your questions. That's my suggestion. Noah, do you want to add something?
Just want to add that you're able, like, let's say you're halfway through the project and you forgot to do a baseline. Like, depending, like what Tash said, like depending on what questions are asked, you're still able to get, sometimes you're still able to get the baseline data, right? It might not be the most accurate thing, but it's better than nothing. So one thing that we did is we were able to get the baseline data by just asking what was it before COVID, or what was it before our project came in.
Yeah, so it's like become an estimation sort of.
It became an estimation thing. So in the world of, there's a saying, in the world of the blind, one eye is king, meaning that if you have no data on it, getting some data and some insight on the baseline is better than no baseline. So like yeah, again, that's all I want to say. Yeah. I think before we answer the other two, I think we're gonna answer those in the Q&A at the end. Let's
Yes.
try to keep going here. So baseline data. right? So as I said before, it's an analysis of the situation prior to the program's intervention. It can also be considered a needs assessment in that sense. Needs assessments are there mainly to define the core problem and really understand the the plights and symptoms of the problem to your stakeholders, and to refine that it's the research to prove that your intervention is the right intervention to fix the problem. But it can also be used as a way to gather the data for the baseline. And the benefit of that is, as I mentioned before, it's a basic comparison of what's changed, how much is going to change in the future. And also, this is really important, when you're doing data collection and you have a baseline, and suddenly your outcomes or the indicator is not really moving, then you know that you need to adjust your program. That means that this is one thing that a lot of people kind of forget too, is like once you've kind of set up the data collection method, you actually have to use the data as a way to see if your program is working or not, right? It's a way to check if your hypothesis about your solution is correct and if you're going to actually solve the problems. Okay, yeah, this was a baseline study. I think we have the next section now.
Yes, let's do the fun part of live co-creation, guys. I hope you guys are still there and still pretty much awake.
Fallen asleep.
Please don't fall asleep, because we need you guys' brain as well to give us ideas. So Noah, if you want to start, oh, there you go.
Yes, so we need your brain right now. We've created this TLC for KSM. I think even Bang Bang asked us a question, so he's here today. This is your project, Bang Bang. Hopefully we didn't completely do everything wrong. And we have input, actions, and outcomes. And as we mentioned before, now we want to attach, so these are the layers, an input layer, an action layer, an outcome layer. And these are the elements: marketing, contents, and input element, networks, and input element. And now we want to attach indicators to each of these elements. But for the sake of today's exercise, we're not going to do all of them. Do you guys have any preferences on which ones you would like me or Tash to create an indicator for? Let's look at the chats.
No one? Oh. Any specific outcomes, Guy? Maybe the better education, maybe the increase in allocated funds, or more education facilities built that we need to focus on today?
Yeah, so which one should we create an indicator for? Better education. Okay, thank you.
Okay, there you go.
You chose
we'll go with Zina. It is very general.
Yeah, it is very general. So in the description here, I kind of already hinted that better education means that more students attend schools. Better education means that more schools are available. I think before, was it Kara that said she wanted an outcome to be more schools. And I mentioned at that point, yeah, Kara, that better schools or more schools seems more like an indicator for better education for children. So what we're going to do now in the application is click add indicator and then define the indicator. So the indicator is number, or you can either do number of schools built or
Eileen has an idea.
Percentage increase of schools.
Number of students regularly attending classes.
Oh, I like that. I like that. So well, let's just do this one too. So percentage increase of schools, percentage increase of school. Let's add that indicator. Add another indicator. Number of students in classes. Sorry, I think it's being because of the character limit. In class. I like that indicator too. Do we have one more? Number of students able to graduate. Oh, okay, yeah. So I like this. Graduation percentage, right? Percentage of graduating kids. So Now before we go on, right? I see you guys all have amazing ideas. Better education of children is our outcome, right? We have defined 3 indicators that you don't have to do 3, but we've defined 3 because it was quite general. 3 indicators that we think represent this outcome: percentage of graduating kids, number of students in class, and percentage of increase of schools, like number of schools. Now what we would have to do is define the data points of some of these indicators. I think what we can do is define the data points of percentage of graduating kids, right?
Before that, maybe we can also set up the goals, right?
Goals. Okay, yes, we can set up the goals. So let's say, what is the goal for percentage of graduating kids? Bang Bang, you're here. Do you have any do you have any numbers for us? Some things that we should know?
30%, 50%, maybe 80% in 3 months. No.
Percentage of graduating kids. Let's be ambitious, right? Okay, let's take big numbers. So let's like 80%. Goal is 80%, right?
In 1 year, right? Because
In 1 year.
graduation usually in, let's say, annual.
Yeah, 80% graduation in 1 year. Maybe, okay, so after the goal, what else do we need to do, Tash?
After that, I think we can start breaking it down into the data points.
Okay, right.
Also, if you guys have following or aligning your indicator or your outcomes toward SDGs, they also have goals, right? Basically, and you can also use that if you want. But that's very much high level. Really depends also on the type of activities you guys are doing.
Well, okay, so let's think about this. Our goal is we want 80%. Yeah, so that's a good point. So the title is defined as percentage of graduating kids. So it's not increase in percentage of graduating kids. So we're talking about absolute numbers here. You can define an indicator, an outcome in both ways. You can talk in absolute numbers or in a delta increase. I think for this example here, Kara, we're talking about an absolute number. So goal is 80%. So let me be more clear. 80% graduate, 80% of all kids graduating. Yeah, 80% of all kids graduating. So maybe one thing we need to define here is that the baseline that we've calculated is that actually only 55% of kids graduate. The data points we need, so our first data point for percentage of graduating kids is how many kids attend school, right?
Yep.
And I think data point 2 is how many kids
Graduated.
Right? And then with those 2 data points, you can calculate what the percentage is of kids graduated. And what you probably have to think of as well is that you're probably going to collect this data from multiple schools. So on top of calculating the percentage, you also have to calculate an average, right? So another data point you have to calculate is how many schools are you collecting data from?
Yep.
I think Mylene said something really good here. We also need to see the number of students who passed and take the next level, right? So I think that's data point 2, or did you mean something else? But with these 3 data points now defined, we can we have this indicator basically set up. And the really cool thing is that now that you have the indicator set up, we can think about the methodology, right? So let's think about it. How are we going to collect this data? The data source. Okay, I have an idea of how we could do it, but let me ask to you guys. How would we collect this data and from who? So the things that we are looking for is the data source.
By whom?
By whom? Frequency, and I guess how.
Are you typing it out?
Yeah, I'm
No?
typing
Oh,
it
okay.
in the chat. Department of Statistics, Department of Education data, right? That's a good data source. Then, so it's interesting, right? Because like Kara is thinking that we can get this from somebody else doing the data collection and us taking it from that database. At least that's how I'm understanding it. In how I was actually thinking about this indicator is that I'm actually going to send the survey to, let's say Depok has like 100 schools, right? Then I'm going to create a survey and send that directly to the 100 schools for them to fill out, or maybe send a volunteer to go to those schools and interview. I don't know who has those statistics. The principal, or
Principals or the teachers or
some
like
of the teachers. Maybe they know
administrations. People.
administration to collect that data. Because
I
often
think both things works actually, Noah,
Yeah.
right? It really depends on what type of the level of your indicators or the level of your data points. Because sometimes Department of Statistics is very high level. It could be going to like national level or province level. But if you want to look into very
regional,
very regional on your own community or one specific school, that will be hard from the Department of Statistics, and you would want to go actually on the ground if you are able to, right?
Yeah. Sorry, there's another section, an indicator called formula. So this is what you can use. You don't have to, it's optional for you to kind of define how you're calculating your indicator. So for us, it's a percent of graduating kids equals sum of kids in school divided. Actually, it's the opposite way around. It's number of kids graduating divided by sum of kids attending school. Okay. Doesn't the government already do that? Will all school principals pay attention to a volunteer in the Philippines? Getting recognition is difficult on the ground. I think that's a really good point. I think that's why defining the methodology is super important, because it takes into consideration what resources and constraints you have available to you. We've talked to projects that are very, very local in certain slum areas in Jakarta, and they have to work on brute force method, meaning their volunteers have to go out collecting all the data, and they don't have the luxury to wait for a government survey to be taken place, because usually governments, at least in Indonesia, they only do it like once every couple of years. So it'll be it'll take some time for you to get that data. And oftentimes when you have people earnestly asking for information, you'd be surprised how receptive some people are. But I mean, I definitely do appreciate the plight. That's a struggle for a lot of people, I think.
Yes. Should we write it down maybe in the description, Noah, by the data source?
Data source would be
probably directly from the schools or the students at this point.
Directly from principal. Okay. Okay,
Awesome.
So I think we've created a really cool indicator here, and so we've defined 3 indicators and then really gone into detail on one. And what you really want to do is attach a couple indicators to each of the elements here. And not a lot of, like, the outcome indicators are more complicated. The action input indicators should be very simple, right? Like how much funding are you actually getting, or how many petitions are you actually receiving? Those things are quite easy to do. So we're getting to the last step. Priyam's reminding us that we have 20 minutes left. Now that you define the indicator, you can now finally create a survey for you to collect that indicator on. So let's go create a survey. In our tool over here, we try to keep it as simple as possible so it's easy for you to collect data. So what are we doing? We're doing education survey, graduation survey. Right, let's save this. Okay, wait, I'll get to that in a bit. Tash, can you read that while I'm creating a survey?
Yeah, I think we got that question as well in the Q&A box.
Yeah, how many students attend?
Let's discuss that after this. There's this very interesting concept that I would like to kind of share to you guys.
Choose a number.
It's a little bit more advanced in a sense, and definitely you guys will need to kind of like look through it more and have more experience to be able to get that correctly. This is quite probably not difficult. Yeah. So this is the survey. I guess Noah's adding questions, and then you can create different type of answers that you want. Could be numbers, could be short answers, and then adding the tags actually, right?
Yeah, the tags are just there for you to realize what data you're actually collecting. And then let me just correct the spelling typo here, and then press save. And actually, I also want to make this question mandatory. Make this question mandatory because I need the data from you guys. And then, okay, so this is amazing. Let me preview this survey, graduation survey. I have 2 questions here where I'm going to be for you to insert numbers. So this is great. I'm going to save this as draft. Now, the survey on our platform is always saved as draft. If you publish the survey, you won't be able to change it anymore. That has to do with how we try to represent the data for you. So let's publish the survey though. And now that we've published the survey, I can actually share the survey really easily with you guys. I'm gonna post it on the chat. And then why don't you guys actually give me some responses, and then we'll see what kind of data comes out. And then imagine you guys are the principals. So go ahead and fill out the survey. Oh wait, actually I need to publish the project first, sorry. So
yeah, I think
so, yes. Oh, no, I need to go back. Publish. Okay, so the project is published, so you should be able to access the survey now. So try on your phone or on your computer, wherever you're on, to give some responses to that data. Let's see. Tashi, maybe also want to answer me. Play.
I added. I answered. Zinab, the link is from.
Oh, the link is in the chat.
Oh, Noah, I think you sent it to to the panelists. There you go.
Oh, sorry.
Apologies for that, everybody.
Sorry, guys.
I suppose it should be 1 or 2.
So this data tab here just kind of gives you an insight in how active your project is, seeing like how many responses you're getting, when was your last submission date, how many contributors you're getting. But I see that nothing's coming in yet. Oh no, here there's some.
Oh no.
So we have a couple here, 7, 8, 167, 200, 150. Okay, amazing. So now that we see the data is actually coming in, what I wanted to show you guys now is the data analysis part of our platform. So now that we have data coming in, what our platform allows you to do is it allows you to create graphs based on the questions that you've created. So let's create a new dashboard here. This dashboard being education dashboard, right? And on this education dashboard, I already have some graphs in my database, but I want to create a new graph. So my project is a demo project. I have a graduation survey, and I have this question here: how many students attend your school? And I want to see the responses. So here I can see all the responses of the data that I'm actually receiving. And then when I add this graph to my dashboard, I would say this is which question was this? How many students attendance? So total attendance KPI. students save. So now we can see that on this dashboard, I'll have an overview over the responses that I'm getting. With other answer types, you're also able to do other really cool things. Like, for example, for this KPI over here, this was a multiple choice question where they were asking students, what were they asking? They were asking students if their community does support entrepreneurship and certain activities. And then what the analytics, yes, I'm sure, what the analytics shows is that over time, over the course of the project, people responded that it sometimes supports, mostly sometimes supports entrepreneurship and social activities, and only 32 times says never. So over time, you can see the difference in the answers in the service that you're getting. And in the same kind of way, we offer pie charts, line charts, bar charts. So any type of analysis that you need to do on your impact data, we kind of offer it for you in our analytics section. And I think that kind of wraps it up on your product side. Maybe right now we have 15 minutes left to answer some questions.
Yes.
Tash, yeah?
I would really like to start answering it from Anil questions. I think it's also this pretty much the same with questions from Hairunisa. The question is, how can we justify that the impact created is the result of our initiative, right? It's not by others or other organization, other institution, or other type of programs. Very interesting questions. There's this concept that we've been hearing as well, and we've been learning, called attribution, or sometimes called also counterfactual. Basically, if you're looking into social return on investment, there's a part of like attribution that you can take a look at more. It's a concept that helps you to understand whether the changes that happen or the outcome is because of your action, not because of the other factors or like other individual, other organizations. Right. It sounds maybe pretty simple, but the way to kind of get that, sometimes it could be very tricky as well. So there are a few ways. You want to add something first, Noah?
Yeah, I just want to say that right now we're not including counterfactual in the courses that we offer online, but just for everybody to know, we are building an online academy where we'll have online courses of us explaining things like counterfactual risk assessment, and we'll go a lot more in depth into things like the problem and impact statement, and hopefully offer you guys more info on how to do impact measurement better. So we'll be able to answer that maybe in better once those courses come out. Yeah. Yep.
So if you just want to take a look now, find attribution, find counterfactuals. It's a little bit tricky to do, but definitely a very interesting one. So you will be able to kind of like justify that this is because of my intervention, right?
Yeah.
This is answered live. Then we have a question from Aji. We usually do needs assessment for the baseline, MONEF during intervention, and evaluation for the endline and pause. What do you think? Do we have any other method? Do you want to try to put some opinion in it, Noah?
So I think so needs assessment and baseline study, they're basically different words for similar things. I think needs assessment focuses more on making sure that your problem statement and intervention is the correct method. See it as a research, as a way to do research and support that your project is doing the right thing and solving the most important problem. And then on top of that, parallel, you can do the baseline study, which is basically to create the baseline start from your indicator. But are there any other method? I don't think so as of right now. Even other like more complicated social impact, social measurement frameworks that use like counterfactuals and like sometimes they do like intervention studies and things like that. They're all based on the same fundamental concept of baseline, intervention, endline, and ex post. Yeah.
To add a little bit, just for me personally, Aji, the need assessment and baseline are two different terms that are actually kind of doing the same thing. But what makes it different for me, usually it's the mindset, right? So needs assessment, sometimes you come in very generally, that you come in and say to yourself and your team that we're coming in and with a blank page, basically, right? You're not trying to come in just to kind of validate your hypothesis or coming in to answer your hypothesis, because then that will kind of like limit yourself in understanding what is exactly needed on the ground and what is exactly the struggles, what is exactly the challenges, and what is exactly the potentials, right? So go general and look at it as a way for you to understand better about the stakeholders. On the other side, baseline studies usually already kind of have a set of parameters or indicators that kind of help you to understand the condition where the stakeholders are not getting any intervention yet from your organization. So that kind of mindset kind of sets apart the two type of activities, if I can put it simply.
Finish up.
And I think there's another part of your question was about the MONEF, right? So I think monitoring evaluation, as we understand it correctly, monitoring helps you to kind of have understanding for day-to-day operations. So it's understanding your input, understanding your output, or the activities itself, so the efficacy of that and those kind of things. Meanwhile, the evaluation is more into like understanding the outcomes, whether that's achieved or not, what is the sustainability, what is the efficiencies, and those kind of things. So I think you're already going to the right direction for me.
Yeah. Just quick, wanted to answer Trang's question. Can we print the survey or use the mobile app to encode the data? So that's exactly why we have the mobile application. The organizer application is there for you to kind of manage and set out your strategy and see how you want to create the change. And then once you've created your surveys, from the mobile data, you can have your volunteers or actors, what we call them, join your project and then fill in data for your project and fill in those surveys. You can either share your survey as a survey link to anybody, so you don't need to have the application, or you can have somebody download the application and then become a member of your project and then give you data. If you have the mobile application, you can also, what we offer now soon is offline survey collection. So that means that if you're in areas where the internet's not that good, that's okay. You can just keep on collecting data, and when you do have internet, then all the data is going to be uploaded to you. So I hope, Tran, that answers your question. And then we only have 9 minutes, so
there's still a lot of questions.
Okay.
What does it take to access the Artemis dashboard? Is there registration charges to fully use the model, or it's open? No, I think that's a question for you.
Yes, Colin. So currently the dashboard, unfortunately, is for Pro and Enterprise. But we are having an update that's coming up in a month where we're going to open up the dashboard to even free users. And the only thing that we're going to limit is how many graphs you can have in your database. And so there's always going to be a free version, a pro version, and then enterprise. And then for NGOs such as yourself, it's usually the most popular tier is the pro version. And then you can check out our pricing online on our website and through the application.
Yep.
Amazing.
I want to answer Pa Bambang's question. He answered this like already an hour ago. Apologies for that. What constitutes a good impact measurement report to the public or government or stakeholders? This is actually a very tough question, but because every audience or every stakeholders have their own expectations and have their own requirements, right? So every time we want to create a report, consists of like our impact and getting the data for our impact from our impact measurement, we really need to understand who do we talk to first, right? What type of audience that we actually giving this type of report to. And again, like I said in the beginning, usually stories, telling the good stories in the report is actually really good, but stories doesn't mean for you to just tell about the really human side of it very qualitatively. but having the proof of your stories to back it up is also going to be a really good balance of your report. Anything to add?
Yeah, one thing I wanted to add, thanks Tash, is you need to know your audience. Is your audience going to, do they want the story? Do they want the quality? Do they want pictures? Do they want the emotion? Or do they care about impact being created? And then it's more about showing your outcomes being achieved, showing the data behind your indicators, even maybe showing a risk assessment to show that you're mitigating risk.
Needs assessment.
Needs assessment. What's your basis? Why are you doing this project this way? So I think it kind of falls into two buckets. Usually it's either customer facing or you're just telling a story for more emotional thing, or either it's in the other bucket of being a little bit more data driven, and that's usually to your donors or to your stakeholders that care about impact being created. So I hope that answers your question, Baimang. We are going to go more in depth into what constitutes a good a good impact report into an Artemis Academy once that comes live. It's super exciting in 2 months. So
stay tuned.
Stay tuned. So wait, there was another question by Chara. I'll read it and then you can answer, Jorge. And then I just want
Are we like running out of time? I think we have enough time to answer both question live.
I think so too. The last two, yeah.
Yeah. Which one do you want to go first?
Okay, well, let's go. I think Jorge went first because he asked first.
Okay, in your experience, what is the expectation for small nonprofits? Are we expected to do counterfactuals and use an established methodology, or do we have a little more leeway on our approach? Pretty good questions.
You want me?
For me personally, if I'm with the experience so far that we were talking to like donors, corporates, different NGOs on different type of like in different levels on different areas as well. If you're a small nonprofit, doesn't mean that you can be say to yourself that it's fine that we're not doing any impact measurement, right? Impact measurement, I think someone mentioned it in the chat as well. It's not just about your responsibility or obligation to your donor, but as well to as your beneficiaries, your stakeholders. It's the way for you to tell them that actually things happening, and this is the changes, and sometimes changes could also be negative, even though it's unintended, right? So those things have to be communicated well. And sometimes if you have enough resources and want to go do counterfactuals and those kind of things, because it takes a lot of human resources, I know, and other type of resources, please do so. But usually the challenge that we've seen so far are definitely funding and human resources to be able to do measurement that goes like really, really advanced, especially, and going like really big in a big population of people that you intervene. So if you have the capability, please do so, because then because it is your responsibility, not only to your donors, but to a lot of other stakeholders in your programs. Noah, do you want to add?
Only one thing I want to add is that, so real talk, smaller donation sizes do have less requirements, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't do the things that we just talked about, because it will set you up to grow and be able to apply for larger grant sizes down the line. The earlier you can show professionally to donors and stakeholders that you have all the data there and can prove your actions are scalable and effective, then there's a lot of support and philanthropy to basically pay your project through and have it grow. So yeah, just wanted to say that. Chara, now off to the last question. Thank you, Chara. Apart from measuring increase of earnings after our training course, how else can we measure the impact of our training? We take data on pre-programs earnings, post-programs earnings, and increased earnings over time. How else can you measure things like empowerment? Sorry, asking so many questions. I'm happy you're asking so many questions. It's amazing. I think the overall outcome that you are defining is an increase in empowerment. And I think what you're asking in your question is, what other indicators can you attach to that outcome that define increase in empowerment? I think there are lots of other indicators that you can attach. Probably have to do with like lifestyle or life choices, also like feeling empowered, more of like do they feel like they're in control of their life? That kind of goes into the whole spectrum of like, are they happy or not, right? And I think online you can find many studies that explain indicators of empowerment other than earnings. Tash?
Yeah, there's a lot of if in Indonesia, if you guys know prasejahtera or like underprivileged, I think there's certain specific indicators, right? It's not only about how many meals per day that the family can afford, but also like their housing and those kind of things. So if you're talking about empowerment or talking about livelihood, definitely you can find a lot of sets of like parameters or requirements or indicators that you can use also. Really depends on what type of outcomes you have.
You should check out gender equality as the SDG and then maybe see the indicators below that SDG goal. I think there should be some indicators there for you. Okay, so Priyam's telling us we got to wrap up. Guys, if you guys have more questions, if you guys have more questions, please join a Facebook group and then ask away. You can share your TOCs, share your outcome questions, share your indicator questions. We're happy to get back to you in our time. Thank you so much.
Yes, and also if you maybe have other questions that you want to ask, you can also contact us at contact@artemis.im. Please also check our website. Please also check the social medias because there's a lot of like different blogs. And later on the Artemis Academy, of course, because that's like really exciting. So stay tuned for that.
To help you
And our platform,
to help you measure your impact. So hopefully it was useful today. I hope we answered all your questions. And we built this platform for you guys. So please do check it out. There's a free version. So getting started can be really easy. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you very much, everybody. I think that's it from us today. Have a nice rest of the day. I don't know wherever you are.
Wherever you are.